Hello and welcome to the 107th episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast. With me as always are my two co-hosts, Neelan.
Hello.
And Kellen.
The OG.
I'm Mark, and on the episode today, we are going to be talking about ways to make sure that your first play of a board game is a good one.
A little self-help how-to manual
For your ears.
For dummies. I've just been told that at any time I want to just interject with for dummies based off the popular Barnes & Noble exclusive book series that you may have read, gardening, archery, home cooking.
They were Barnes & Noble's exclusives? I'm learning
They
so
were not
much.
Barnes & Noble's.
Well.
Absolutely not. Anyway, moving on. The reason that we're bringing this up is that we had a bunch of first plays yesterday at BGB West.
BGB West. BGB Best.
Following BGB East, also known as BG Beast, which was a couple weeks ago, where listeners of ours got together in the New York area, right? In around New
Yes.
York? Yeah. To spend a day gaming together. So we had our own version of that here on the West Coast in LA at the Dragon and Meeple. So we got to play a bunch of games with a bunch of listeners. Turnout was really nice and we all had a good time, but it seemed like a good conversation to have after the big meetup yesterday. And just a big thank you for everybody who came out. I know we had somebody who says he happened to be in town from Alabama, but I think Brian flew out just to play. And also a big shout out to, well, their YouTube channel is known as Worthy Opponent, which is Worthy Opawnement. They do a Chinese language board game review podcast.
Yeah, they reached out to us and we've kind of helped them get started with equipment and things like that. So,
and we didn't realize that they were local.
Yeah.
When they showed up to the meetup yesterday, we thought that they were based in China somewhere, and then all of a sudden they were there yesterday, and it was really awesome to meet them.
And they took some fun video of the event as well.
Yeah, looking forward to
there was
seeing that.
crying.
So that's what we'll be getting into later on in the show. But for right now, let's talk about the games we've been playing. So, Kellen, what have you been playing?
All right. I am super excited to talk about this game. I think it's the most excited about a board game I've been in at least 6 months. No joke. Neelan's eyes.
Yeah.
Since Glorantha the Gods War. Neelan's eyes went up, which is always good for a podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
To show your surprise and delight.
Visual reference. Well,
visually.
The reason I'm shocked is I think you've been saying for a long time that board games have not been...
That's
not
right.
been kicking off your hype for a little bit.
I keep asking the Discord, hoping someone's got something. Rumble Nation is a small Japanese game from a publisher called Hobby Japan, and it was published in 2017, and there's a chance that it will make its way with an American publishing company this year, but you can order it online, so this game does exist and is not out of print if you want to check it out. Rumble Nation is a 30 to 45 minute area control game for 2 to 4 players that uses dice as a primary placement mechanism. The way that the game feels is this sort of springs that you are loading, and you don't understand how they're all going to uncoil, but they're all going to uncoil, and one's going to uncoil, and that's going to affect the 3 around it. So there are regions numbered 2 through 12, and that is randomly distributed on a map of probably Japan. And you score victory points for area controlling that region equal to the 2 through 12, but they are resolved in order of 2 all the way up through 12. When one region resolves, if you have units in adjacent regions and you win the 2 region, you get 2 reinforcement cubes in every adjacent region. So that is going to help you win other battles. So the way the game works is you actually are only placing, and then all of the regions spring, and war happens once, and then you score, and the game is over, and it's done in 45 minutes. That's cool on its own, and then you couple that with a really straightforward rolling dice mechanic. You roll 3 dice. You can reroll all of them if you want to. You can't reroll 1 or 2 of the dice. You must reroll all 3, and then you separate them into 2 groups. 2 dice and 1 dice. The 2 dice determine where you are placing, and the 1 dice determine how many units you're placing, where 1 and 2 is 1 unit, 3 and 4 is 2 units, and 5 and 6 is 3 units. So you roll the dice, you go, okay, so I could put 1 unit in 4, or 2 units in 3, or 1 unit in 6. And then you go, nope, don't want to do any of that, reroll all the dice, and now you only have those choices that are there. There are also cards that give you special powers that you can use once per game. That is it. That is the whole game. This is light and refreshing area control. I think when someone thinks of area control, and one of our friends, a good friend of the podcast, Dean, does not like area control. And so when I conned him into playing this yesterday, I knew he was going to like it, and he did like it.
You knew he was going to like it. Wow, because I would not be certain about that.
Because it's area control. He doesn't like area control.
Right, exactly. That's what made me think that he wouldn't like it.
Because it's effervescent.
Yeah, that's true.
It's refreshing, like Dasani.
Dasani was your example.
It is the worst water. It tastes like plastic. Rumble Nation caught my eye looking on Board Game Geek when I saw someone describe it as El Grande with dice. And I said, I must own this thing. And then I saw that it was from the island of Japan. And I handed them my credit card. All I will say is, having this level of area control in this light of a game, it stimulates, but also doesn't make you feel too mad at what happens, because ultimately it's dice.
Right.
I think that if you're a tryhard who must, be able to deterministically place every one of your pieces, and this may not be a game for you, but what it does is it allows for meaningful decisions. It allows for an interesting puzzle as things unlock. It allows for some feistiness with each other. And then you couple that with roll 3 dice as the main mechanism. And I think that that's delightful because it limits your options. And in limiting those options, you get to make the best of maybe 3 decisions. And I think that that is so great for a specific type of game. This is the perfect way to start Cthulhu War. This is the perfect way to start a game of not Kemet, because I wouldn't say Kemet, of Inish. I keep talking because I know you're about to offer the resistance on the other side of the table.
Not especially. I mean, I didn't have as positive impression. I've only played it once, and I think actually in reviewing this game specifically, that fact that I've only played it once comes into play more than maybe most games. I feel like it's hard to argue that this is anything but at least a solid game. And I think it's probably more than that. All those good points, the quickness of it, the fact that it plays very smoothly, there's very low rules overhead, all of that, like lightness and quickness, are almost undeniably positives. And just that alone is hard to counteract that and have it be a bad game. But it is also clever, and there are good decisions to be made. When we played it the first time, I just didn't grasp how the cascading worked. I mean, the explanation was fine. The explanation worked. It's just in practice how all that cascading happened. I didn't really just grok it. I just didn't understand it as well as I should have. And so I don't feel comfortable giving it a ringing endorsement just yet, because I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I don't know if I even could say that I've really played a game of it, because it just felt like a learning game, like people like to say learning games. And I don't like the idea of playing learning games. I like to just dive in and play for real the first time. But I felt like, for me, that felt like a learning game.
What I remember distinctly from when the time we played it was, it seemed like you were firing off a lot of cascades early, but they weren't sort of snowballing in the way that you would have hoped. Like, you were getting like a lot of sort of small points grabs sort of in the middle and early parts of the battle. And one of the things that struck me is, by contrast, Kellen had a lot of very crucial cascades to get big point grabs towards the end. Which made me just think that maybe that Kellen had just internalized the ways to get big points quicker.
Sure.
I don't know. I didn't do great in that game. But it did make me feel like there was something to knowing exactly which regions to prioritize in order to maximize the benefit of cascading towards bigger and bigger points, right?
It's crazy because at first you think, okay, I'm going to just make everything cascade and that's going to score all the points. And then when you realize getting second place in the 12 region is worth 6 points,
right,
and getting first place in the 2 region is worth 2 points, that unless that 2 is cascading out and really helping you, it may actually not be the smart move. And that's where the variable setup of the board, I feel like, is a delight, because in our first game of it, 10, 11, and 12 were all next to each other in a cascade.
Yeah.
And that forces a very specific type of end game. In other subsequent plays I've had, that has been way more disparate and varied, and that makes things even more complicated.
Sure.
But I am sympathetic to the idea that the game, you get through the rules explanation and people go, that's it. It almost feels like the first round of doing it 3 times.
Sure.
And that would be absurd. I would never recommend that. But as the wars unspring, and then it's like, score your points, it's over. And that's maybe right around, scoring the 10th region is when, Mark, you're like, okay, I get the game now.
Sure.
And it's
Right.
Yeah.
great, that was fun.
Right.
The mechanic you described where you're setting up a lot of stuff and you just watch it unfold is one of my favorite sorts of things in games. Like the way it worked in Diplomacy, I sort of found hard to internalize, but I did find that satisfying. Neuroshima Hex does this really well as well, where it's a lot of setup and then you just watch this war, like you say, like a clockwork machine, just sort of unravel. And it's almost just like you can't possibly work through all the variables that are going to happen to determine the entire state of the war. So it's a little bit of a fun surprise, a reveal at the end, which I liked about that a lot. I think if I did have one criticism of my first game, and Kellen, that'd be interesting to hear you counter this, is I did feel like, okay, there are specific regions I want to focus on, but the dice just aren't allowing me to do that. Is that something that has borne out as being maybe less true in more games?
I think that I don't play board games like you do.
No, I mean, that's fair.
And so, like, I only want to be in region 11, 12, or 4 is not how I would approach Rumble Nation or any board game, where I think and we've talked about sort of the differences in how we think about things. I think you do have to be able to roll with the punches and say, okay, maybe I will accept getting a couple points over here and dink and dunk as opposed to some grand strategy. If you went into it in the first round and said, all I want to do is conquer these 3 regions, I do think you'd have a bad time.
Yeah.
The card system does allow for there's basically 5 powers available out of 12, and those are randomized each game. And anytime you don't want to take the dice, you can just take a power. So if you must do one thing, you might look to the cards to be the savior in that critical linchpin moment. Right. But it is a dice game, right? Like, so we can't take that away from it. But I think for being so light, for being so pleasant, you don't see that in Area Control, and you don't see it in such a small pack. Everything about it, I'm stoked about. So if you're interested, if that sounds cool, you can find that online. I believe I ordered it from Amazon Japan. That is Rumble Nation.
I played a long out of print Feld game, Macau, with listener Daniel, who is a big proponent of Feld games in general and Macau specifically. I got a copy of this a little while back, but never got a chance to break it out. But he knows the game well and brought it, and we played it yesterday. Macau is a Feld game. It is not like You're the Dragon or
it's not like
Delphi,
the good Feld game.
or Oracle of Delphi, in that it is a Feld game in name alone. This is a point salad game. But it's got a lot of unique aspects to it that I've not seen in many games. The main crux of it is this windrows mechanic, where I think sort of like Amerigo, which is another Feld game, what you do at the beginning of a round is you roll dice of different colors, and the pips correspond to the number of actions you will be able to get of that color, but also how many rounds away you'll be able to access them. So if a 6 red is rolled, you can get 6 red actions, but you'll get them 6 rounds from now. So there is a push and pull between getting actions you need now. What's funny?
Neelan just noticed that I was scrolling. I found an article for the 100 best anime movies of all time.
Okay.
It's not a page by page, it's just a scroll. So I'm sitting here while you're talking, trying not to list it. I'm trying to what's the number 1 movie I want to know?
Yeah, right. What is it?
I haven't gotten there.
Right, well,
better be My Neighbor Totoro. And I haven't gotten there yet. So.
Well, I think the listeners, feel free to break in. I mean, you're going to break in anyway. That's sort of your style. But
Akira.
Okay.
I'll accept that.
All right.
Mark, have you seen Akira?
I saw Akira when I was way too young to see it.
All right.
So I didn't resonate with me the way it did.
Neelan?
I have not seen Akira.
Cut his mic.
Heathen. So, yes. Where was I? So the idea is that you may want to take a blue action right now, but the problem is that you rolled a blue 2, so you'll get 2 blue actions, but it'll be 2 rounds from now. And it does share a little bit of Year of the Dragon, because in any round where you don't have actions assigned,
People die.
well, yes, you get punished is what the terminology is. So, or tortured. I think it may be tortured.
God.
It's some bad thing happens to you. So there's a lot of, in the rules explanation, if you don't do this, you get tortured, or you get punished. And also it's got this tableau building mechanism where every round you have to take a card. The cards all have a cost in the color cubes, and you have a tableau of 5 spots for these cards. And once you build a card, it goes from your tableau to your active area, basically. But the problem is, if you ever have a full tableau and need to take another card, you get
Killed.
punished. Close enough.
Tortured.
Tortured, exactly. So it's a thing where You draft cards for two reasons. One, because they make your engine better, but two, because they're easy to fire off because you are constantly trying to churn out that space where you're working on cards. There's a area control aspect to it. There's a pick up and deliver aspect to it. It's got a lot of different things going on with it. Daniel and I were talking about why this game has been out of print for so long. And I didn't really have a firm grasp as to why, because I think it's a really, really good game. And I was wondering, like, if this is such a good game, why is it out of print? Like, you would think there'd be a demand for it, but not a lot of people have played it, and maybe that's why there's no demand for it. We were talking about like the chicken, the egg aspect of it. But he said, and I would agree with him, like, if Feld released this game today, I think it would go gangbusters. I think it would be super, super popular, because this is like, I'm not the biggest Feld fan. I do like his games, but this is like really good Feld. This is like, if you want all that point stuff from Feld, if you want the Castles of Burgundy, but with this other extra weird mechanic, this Windrose turning this knob thing mechanic, it's great. It really is a great game. It scratches all those Feld itches that you want hit. And yeah, it's just really, really nice. It's got these aspects of other things that
just imagine with me for a second. Just imagine. Are you imagining?
I'm casting my mind back.
If an author, like wrote like 3 really good novels.
Yeah.
And then for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Just mixed and matched sections from those 3 novels and then repackaged them and then sold them to you at Barnes & Noble as an exclusive.
Yeah.
And then you kept buying them and you just have this smile on your face. And then you just keep buying them, but nothing has changed. So it's like, instead of the character being at the end of the book, he shows up at the beginning of the book, and then somehow you just love it.
Yeah.
So it's like Wheel of Time.
It's like M. Night Shyamalan. Which is that like,
what are these references?
Isn't that what you're sort of describing?
I'm describing Stefan Feld. Come on.
I know you're describing Stefan Feld, but I think you're also describing M. Night Shyamalan, who I think you like.
What this has nothing to do with M. Night Shyamalan.
But no. What I'm saying is, like, you're talking about repackaging a book series. Let's talk about repackaging a movie idea. Like, M. Night Shyamalan has this twist, but I like M. Night Shyamalan movies. Fine, they're fine, but like, that works. Some people like their thing.
Okay, if we're going to M. Night Shyamalan, let's do this. Which movies of M. Night do you feel like are riffing on his own movies?
No, it's riffing on his...
He always has a twist.
Yeah.
Always having a twist is not the same thing as putting the same mechanics in a blender, blending them up, ingesting them, vomiting them back into the blender, blending it back up, and then serving it to people again.
Okay, I think you're absolutely wrong about what Steve...
Sorry, okay, but... if a board game designer always had a twist, okay, Reiner Knizia, his scoring always has a twist, or frequently has a twist. That doesn't make that trite.
That's what I'm saying about Feld.
Yeah, but that's not the same thing, because Feld literally copy-pastes portions of games and then re-puts them in other games.
First of all, Oracle Delphi, Year of the Dragon are completely different. They're outside his thing. And I'm saying, like, this has aspects of those games, but it doesn't feel like a
wholesale.
Yeah, like I'm just putting this in here and that in here. And the Windrose mechanism is a completely different one, and the pick up deliver is different. I mean, with Knizia, you want a tight design. With Knizia, a weird scoring is something that you sort of like. I mean, just because they play the hits doesn't mean it's bad. There are Feld fans. This is a game for Feld fans. This is a game for anybody, I think, but this is a game for Feld fans, and maybe not for anybody, because there are people who do not like Feld games at all, and they will not like this. It's not going to turn them around. But like, there are people who like Feldian games. This is
this is one of the great ones. It's essence of Feld,
right? And like
a perfume,
right? And I think like a game like Castles of Burgundy has even more broad
essence
appeal,
of Feld,
right? But also a more broad appeal, and I think that this game isn't far off from that. I just think if this game was released today, it would be beloved. I just think it's a really solid game for those who like Feld games or M. Night Shyamalan movies. Yeah. So if you like Sixth Sense or Castles of Burgundy, go ahead and spend $75 on a out-of-print copy of Macau.
Or Lady in the Water, a seminal masterpiece.
Nealon.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to grasp with the concept, right, that Feld reusing parts of his games is synonymous with M. Night having a twist. Like, for example...
It's not a one-to-one
Well, but like, we could say that P.T. Anderson has amazing cinematography, right? Because he usually uses one of 3. That's his thing. But that isn't something... You don't go to a new P.T. Anderson movie and go, oh, he made it beautiful again.
But like, let's get
Specific.
That could, like, let's say like Wes Anderson. Like, there's a very distinct aesthetic and actors and choices and dialogue to a Wes Anderson film.
That's a better one.
That feels
I could
like
get behind that.
more remixy.
Why didn't you say Wes Anderson, you idiot?
But I don't understand. So tell me what Macau does that other games do.
I haven't played
What
Macau.
are you talking about? That's my point. What are you talking about?
What do you get? If I had to know before I spoke, we wouldn't have a podcast.
I was trying to explain the game to you, and you're looking for the #1 anime movie of all time, so you can't even have that based on my explanation because you haven't heard my explanation of it.
I talked with Daniel after your game too.
Okay, right. And you're like, tell me how this is like other Feld games.
No, I want to try Macau. I've had it on my want to play list for a
This
long
is one of Daniel's favorite Feld games.
Yeah, I think he has like a Feld ranking. I think this is 3 for him.
I was talking to him briefly about this as well, but I was curious. Like, you said this is one of his better ones. Like, is it really like up there in the Feld canon
absolutely.
for you? Like,
I think you're gonna really like it.
But
I will really like it.
Yeah.
I only like In the Year of the Dragon and Oracle Delphi.
Oh, have you played Burgundy?
I played Burgundy. I played Bruges, and I was kind of like,
I'm surprised you don't like Burgundy.
yeah.
Okay, so maybe you won't like it that much. I think you will appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's probably fairly possible that the best elements of Macau were stripped out and then like prostituted into like 4 other Feld games.
Maybe. I mean, I'll say that the punishment thing does feel like Year of the Dragon, but Year of the Dragon is like all punishment. And the Windrose thing harkens to Amerigo, maybe, but... All right, so Neelan, what have you been playing?
I've been playing It's a Wonderful World.
Wait, I've been playing that too.
Yeah, we all just played It's a Wonderful World. This is designed by...
Wait, let the people hear it.
Yeah, what does It's a Wonderful World sound like? This is It's a Wonderful World. It is published by Frédéric Guerard, I want to say.
Published by?
It is not published by him,
Yeah,
but it is
yeah.
designed by Frédéric Guerard.
Sure. I mean, you're looking at me. I have no idea.
I don't know.
Sounds good to me.
It is published by Lucky Duck Games. The art is by Anthony Wolf, and this was given to us as a review copy. This is a drafting engine building tableau game. What that means is at the start of the game, of which there are 4 rounds of drafting, everyone is dealt 7 cards. You pick a card, reveal it face up in front of you, pass the cards to your left, and continue until you've drafted 7 cards. These cards can either be, once you've drafted all 7, immediately discarded for a colored resource. There are 5 different colors of resource. You can discard a card to get that resource, or you can keep the card as a project that you're currently building by placing the resource onto it. You also have a number of resources that you're producing after the drafting phase, and partly what you're trying to do by sort of building these projects is get more resource generation going. One of the things that's quite fun about the resource step is all of the resource colors produce in order. So if you produce, say, a gray project that produces yellow cubes, you'll then immediately get to produce yellow cubes. So it's kind of fun to like figure out the puzzle of what you build and the order in which you build it. This is all in service of collecting cards that are going to build towards big point grabs, which are also in the deck, collecting victory point chips in the form, weirdly, of men and women.
Well, then that is a resource. They're not.
Yeah, well, that's
The
what's
victory
weird
point
about
chips.
it.
Oh, is the idea that their population? Is that what it is?
I think that's probably what it is. Population or...
Well, and different societies like get more points for men or women.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Neelan society loved men.
Exactly. So you could get cards that will maybe multiply the points you're going to get from the men in your population, which was super good for me. The art is quite beautiful on this, and actually that's kind of the whole game for what it's worth. It's 4 rounds of drafting, accumulating resources, building projects, getting points. It's beautiful card art, kind of an odd theme. I don't know if It's a Wonderful World is a reference to something that I'm not realizing, but it's kind of this sort of cyberpunky future, semi-dystopian theme. It's a weird, odd choice for theme, but the game I found quite satisfying. It's interesting because it comes on the tail of a drafting game, which is probably my favorite, Carnival of Monsters. So I was constantly comparing it to that. It has a similar amount of fiddliness in terms of component breadth, I should say. Like, you have a lot of little pieces that you're moving back and forwards of your cards. But I was finding the process of it quite fun, like figuring out the little puzzle of, okay, if I get this, then I can build this, which will give me the resources, which I can then use on the next card. I enjoyed that.
It's a smidgen fiddly, all of the different translucent cubes, because there's like 5 different resources, but these are the sort of King of Tokyo kind of energy token translucent cubes in 5 different colors, so it's fun to have them. They're also on a board in the center that is like an arrow pointing, which is actually really helpful for you to visualize. It's like, okay, this builds that, which is then going to produce that, and that happens in that order.
Yeah.
So in a direct comparison to Carnival of Monsters' useless cardboard in the middle, like this is actually quite functional.
Sure, yeah.
and pretty. I think there's a lot to like here. And one of the things that I like the most is that the draft happens and then everyone has their 7 cards and then it's just figure your stuff out. And so you're sitting there doing a little bit of a, okay, now I've drafted my wonderful world of possibilities. I got to sort out what to do with that. And everyone does it at once and it's satisfying.
Yeah.
Like, that part of it is truly just satisfying. So that was the first thing that I really liked. And the second thing I like is that each card can either be used to build the building or can be a straight recycle bonus. So you discard it out of the game to get a resource right then. And so hate drafting becomes much more possible because especially in the first round, like you get 7 cards, you are not putting all 7 of those buildings out to build because that's not possible. Or I hope it's not possible and I'm just horrible at the game. So that means that you will be just snatching cards for their single cube bonus, which allows you to try to at least pay somewhat of attention. Okay, Mark wants blue cards, so I got to figure out a way to bury those if I can.
Yeah, it goes down really, really smooth. I think that's one of the biggest qualities of this game. For me, the 2 games that came to mind, and the one is the most obvious one, is Seven Wonders. I mean, you start with 7 cards, and it's a drafting game. It feels much smoother than Seven Wonders. Seven Wonders is known as a game that takes 30 minutes to teach and 30 minutes to play. So the rules explanation and playing the entire thing took less than an hour. So just went really smooth and scratches that same drafting itch. The other game that sort of came to mind in thinking of it was Terraforming Mars, because it's got that big stack of cards that Terraforming Mars has, and that sort of feels like where all the possibilities lie. Like, Terraforming Mars is an engine builder where you have a big stack of cards, and what am I going to draft, or what am I going to take, and what am I going to buy, and how is this going to make my engine fire off? So I feel like for people who like Terraforming Mars, who are looking for a quicker experience, this might offer that sort of compromise. I think my only negative, or my perceived negative, because I've only played the one time, is I wonder how much depth there is to it. It's a game that will never be offensive. I don't see it as ever a game that I would refuse to play, but I don't know how quickly it would be until it got stale. How many games?
One of the things that was striking even in that first game is the cards all have a very similar structure to them. You're not going to be surprised by cards even towards the end of the game. There are moments where you look at a card in your opening hand and you're just like, ooh, I really want that, and I have the right resources, I have to build it. So that's good. That's what you want in a drafting game. But you're not going to be surprised by card effects after the second round.
Yeah, and so I played this now at the 3-player count we did, and then also at the full player count of 5. And at 3, there's that tighter experience because there's only 21 cards that are even in the system. And then in a 5-player game, that would be 35 cards. So it did feel like there was more ability in the 3-player game to strategize, because after you had drafted 3 cards, you knew every possibility that could exist. And so pivoting might need to happen right around that time. In the 5-player game, it took 5 rounds before you'd said, okay, now I've seen everything. And it was a little more open-ended or looser, let's say. It is very inoffensive. And I think, it reminds me of a game that'll start a game night that people will play for a couple months. Hey, let's do that. And there's a fun puzzle going on, but it doesn't set my heart aflame.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like Mark said, for a game you can learn in 5 minutes and play in half an hour, you could certainly do a lot worse.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. That's It's a Wonderful World by Lucky Duck Games.
Before we get into our discussion about making sure that your first plays are as good as they can be, we're going to read a review. Reviews are one of the best ways you can help out the show. In addition to telling your gaming friends to give us a listen, you can review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you got this podcast. So let's go ahead and read a review. This comes from JBones6969. So nice he did it twice. The title is The Best Gaming Podcast. This is the best board game related podcast. How do you feel about that, Kellen?
Full stop.
Gotcha.
Don't keep going.
I have listened to today, aside from Shut Up and Sit Down, Heavy Cardboard, and Punching Cardboard.
Wait, what?
Yeah, he called this the best game.
Besides 3
Besides
other?
the
Best guess.
A lot of podcasts
That
to listen
seem
to.
like the best. Seems like 4th, but I love how the red tank and green tank are almost kissing on their album cover.
This is true to
I
life.
do like that album cover, as it truly implies the what's BL?
Big love.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. It implies the BL going on in this podcast. Wait, is this like something I don't get? So maybe if you want to join our Discord and tell us what BL means, that would be great. That's at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. It truly implies the BL going on in this podcast and gives you something to look forward to in the main plot. Okay. Great chemistry, fun banter, think Gilmore Girls, and deep themes. 5 out of 5. If I'd watched Gilmore Girls, I would love to figure out which one I am.
I'm Lorelai. I've looked up BL.
Okay.
And it means boy love.
Oh, okay. That's fair. Totally fair.
And yes, but I think it's more in the Japanese weird way.
Appropriate.
Besides 4 other podcasts, I don't know. It's garbage.
Yeah, I don't know how we're the best board gaming podcast and then we're ranked 4th, but thank you. What is it?
J-Bones.
Yeah, thank you, J-Bones 6969.
I hope we were creeping up to the top 3.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so let's dive into our main discussion, which is doing your best to make sure that your first play of games are as good as they can be. Again, this sort of came to mind because of our playing a bunch of games with people for the first time yesterday at BGB West. So we thought we'd talk about some pitfalls that you can fall into when it comes to the first plays to make them sort of suboptimal and what you can do about that. I think, Neelan, you might have had a less than great, no fault of our fans.
No.
Surely.
And
but you had a less than ideal play yesterday?
Yeah, I think this was very heavily discouraged and 100% no fault of Daniel, listener who we mentioned earlier in the podcast. He taught me Brass Birmingham, and we had this discussion after the game, so there's no like bad blood between this. Brass Birmingham is a very heavy game.
Do you have bad blood with anyone?
Do I have bad blood with anyone?
Oh, that's a good question. Do you have any, like, you don't have to name names, but I wondered.
Enemies?
Yeah.
Gosh, no, I don't think so.
No, really? You don't have to really,
I mean, not since like high school or college.
I feel like I definitely have people
No, I think I can't. Oh, no, I mean, yeah, maybe like 1 or 2. Maybe like well...
Disgruntled mothers.
Yes. In a work context, maybe.
Yeah,
like,
okay.
But that's about it.
Yeah, I definitely have that.
So Brass Birmingham is a very heavy game that has quite intricate and specific systems that are quite hard to internalize. And Daniel taught it beautifully, but we were playing this game at 10 p.m. at the end of a very long day of board games at BGB West in a noisy environment with not a lot of light. It was not ideal. And I was the only person who had never played the game before.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of this cascade of being crushed by everything, like mentally and strategically, that led to a very bad first impression of that game for me. The reason I sort of wanted to talk about this is that I think that can go one of 2 ways, right? You can either sort of internalize that experience and be like, I'm never playing that game ever again.
Yeah.
Or enough of the systems of the game can maybe like win out to allow you to appreciate some part of it. And that's such a sort of a hard balance to ride. And I think for most people, you would find that they would be discouraged from playing that game ever again.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, and that's one thing I hate about having a bad first play because, you know, when it becomes clear that the first play was bad and not as intended for whatever reason, I have a hard time, even though I realize that's the case, I have a hard time sometimes giving the game another play just because that first play was so distasteful that I just say to myself, I know it's a better game, but I just don't have any impetus to play it again. And I hate that about it because I feel like I'm cutting myself off from potentially a good experience.
Yeah, that like emotional link is such a strong part of memory, so that it just becomes embedded in your brain as tying that negative experience to the game itself. I'm thankful to say, and I like I said, I spoke about this with Daniel afterwards, I appreciated enough what Brass was doing, and it's a game that sort of lives in your mind afterwards, and that you're starting to think, oh, I know exactly what I would have done differently, especially after your first game, that I think I would almost certainly play it again. I would definitely want to play it again. I'm making plans to try play it again in the near future. So thankfully, I haven't been sort of put off Brass Birmingham entirely. But yeah, I think we just wanted to sort of talk more generally about these sorts of conditions that could lead to these bad first play experiences and how we could avoid them.
So Neelan, what could you have done differently to have a good first play of Brass Birmingham?
Oh, the other thing I didn't mention actually is that because we started this at 10 p.m., and the venue was closing in 2 hours, we were literally rushing to finish the game, which is, again, about as bad as it can go in a game of Brass Birmingham, where you have to like really think through everything you're doing. Because often what happens is like, okay, I'm down 1 coin, and it's like, God, that's infuriating. Anyway, obviously a game like this, you want to play almost in private and quiet with the time to sort of appreciate and think about what you're doing. Certainly not at the end of an evening of playing board games.
On a day where you're playing a bunch of games at a con, this would be something you would aim for early or mid or something, or after a break or something, not towards the end.
It just strikes me like if someone doesn't like a movie that you wanted them to like, and you're like, well, how much sleep did you have the night before? Right. Were you hungry at the time? Yeah. Did you need to use the bathroom, and did that, alter your play? I think I had a friend in college who used the term thriving to describe literally like the state of mind that you're in going into the game. And even something as simple as that, like, will really color an experience. And then you could end up never playing it again through no fault of the game itself.
So I had a different sort of bad first impression. This wasn't yesterday, this was years ago. And it actually wasn't even really a bad first play. There was nothing wrong with the players or the rules or anything like that. This was my first plays of Dominion. I was really late to playing Dominion. I was years after other people had been playing it for a long time. So my issue with playing Dominion came from the fact my first game was with three other players who were like experts at it. And so they were flying. They knew exactly what to do. They're doing all their turns. And when it comes to me, I'm stuttering and wasn't sure about what to do here and there. And I wasn't familiar with the deck building aspect.
For dummies.
So it just became a game where I felt bad because I was a person who was dragging things down. I got crushed, which felt bad. And it just was a bad overall experience. This also, I've alluded to this before, but I played Agricola before playing with this group. But a couple of my recent plays of Agricola have been with people who are just fantastic at it, and have just made for the same sort of thing where I'm just getting crushed and I'm slowing everything down and I'm taking suboptimal moves because I don't know any better, and it's sort of ruining the experience for other players. I think that is a result of games that have a learning curve where you gain an expertise in it and it really affects the way you play. And I think the way to solve that problem is either play with people who were understanding, and in my case, the people who are playing with were understanding, so maybe that's not even a solution because I was internally just feeling bad. But I think this one's a hard one to remedy, but for me, the best way to combat that would be to seek out playing this with people who are at your same level, and I think we're talking about first plays, but the inverse is also true. If you're an expert at a game, you're probably going to have more fun playing with people who are playing at a higher level when it comes to games that reward that sort of like expertise.
You actually reminded me of a game that I still have not revisited to this day for that exact reason. Was my first game of Race for the Galaxy was played with three other players who I love. People I absolutely love, but they have played this game a lot more than I had. And I had such a profoundly negative experience of playing the game that it just put me off playing it for the longest time, because this was very early in my board gaming experience. So I had a lot of other games to play, so it just never resurfaced. And only recently have I had the itch, partly because of starting the podcast and everyone's telling me, how have you not played more Race for the Galaxy, of actually wanting to return for it.
I'm the exact same with Dominion. Like, I hear great things about Dominion. I know it's great, but I just have that sour memory in my mind that it's hard to extricate from the actual game itself.
I think Uncle Callan here just wants to come in with some general wisdom.
Okay.
I think one of the things I do when I watch movies is I try not to necessarily choose the exact film that I'm going to watch with Christina, the Blue Tank, until maybe like a half hour before we're going to watch it. So there may be 2 or 3 or 4 things that we're kind of circulating around, and then we choose the one that fits the mood. And I think similarly with board games, you can be very excited for something. In anticipation of BGB West, I spent multiple hours getting ready to play Imperial, which is a new game that's EMPRYEAL, I think. Anime Trains. It's a train game with magical anime powers, okay? Took an hour to get this box set up. It's the biggest box I've ever seen. Took an hour to learn the rules. I watched a video. I was ready to go. Took up the majority of my bag that I brought to BGB West. And at no point was it right to jam Anime Trains into my BGB West experience, whether that was I didn't have the right player count, whether there were too many people, whether my mood, I wasn't ready to start a big game. One of the things that Neelan conveniently left out of his story about Brass Birmingham is that a dear friend of his gave him a solemn warning. And he said at 9:59, he said, "I'm about to go play Brass Birmingham." And he saw a look in my eye, and what did you say, Neelan?
What did I say?
You said, I don't remember. Well, no, and I said, that's that's going to be it for you.
Yeah,
and but it was a stern warning.
It was almost like, if you do this, you're done for the night. I think it's like literally
I used the word kill.
Killed, yeah. This will kill
But
you.
I don't want to divulge all the words that surrounded it. And he saw the look in my eyes, and he knew, that he was going against my wishes.
Your protege was going against the master's teaching.
And as it turns out, he had a bad time. Who
was right?
Wouldn't
Who's
have done
wrong?
it. He texted me later that night saying so. And now we're here. But back to my story. Some might say that was a missed opportunity to play the game. I could have probably made it happen. But everyone has that internal feeling, like, where you're trying to jam it in there. Whether it's like, well, BGB says the best player count for this game is 3. We've got 6, so like it'll work, and there are even times where people try to do that when the player count for the game like says 5 and you've got 6, and you're like, well, we could
split up the
make
cards
this
a little extra. Yeah,
we could make this work.
We don't need 4 cards each. We'll take 3.
So I am very, very cognizant of first plays. I'm on Board Game Geek looking at the recommended player count for a specific game and trying to be somewhere in the vicinity of that. I'm looking at, do I really need to do the beginner variant of Food Chain Magnate that they're saying don't play with the milestones? And, you go online and people are like, don't do that, like that you're not even playing the game at that point. And so you try to cultivate that perfect first experience, and sometimes that makes it so that it takes longer to get to a game. Mezzo is another one that I could have brought to BGB West, but I know that our first game of it should be the 3 of us plus the blue tank, because I know that will be the optimal first experience for it, and it shouldn't happen in a closed dungeon hall.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you were deliberating for a long time about our first game of Diplomacy for that exact reason, right? Like the right map, the right player counts, the right...
Yes, I kind of obsess over it because you may only get that one shot at it, and let's make sure it's right. Mm-hmm. I get confused, when people say, well, I want to try it as a 2-player and then see how it goes to 4-player, but they're talking about like a dudes on a map area control game.
Right.
Like, why? I don't, that doesn't work for me.
I know Kellen does, as he just sort of alluded to, he dives deep into making sure that first play is optimal as possible. But I think at the very least, I'd recommend people go to BGG and look up the recommended player count. That's something I always take a look at before bringing out a game for the first time. But yeah, if you can dive even deeper like Kellen does and check out the forums and stuff, you'll get an even better experience, I think, generally.
I mean, I think it's part of the investment, right? Because there's the investment of money, but then it's the time to get there. Because we played It's a Wonderful World last night. I had only read the rule book the one time, so I made everyone punch out all the components. And that worked because they're not that many components.
Yeah.
If I had tried that with Anime Train game, it would have taken literally 35 minutes. There's a full page diagram for how to pack up Imperial. That would not work. And so it's that compromise of getting a game to the table. And I think that probably ultimately means I do get less games to the table, but that they're probably better experiences.
Yeah.
It goes without saying that another important thing to get a good first impression is to ensure that the rules that you are being taught are correct, or that you know the rules, or that you're teaching. I had a game of Endeavor, and it's the only game of Endeavor I've ever played. That's been re-released recently as Endeavor Age of Sail. And this game is doing gangbusters. People love it. And I still don't want to play it because the first time I played it in a bar, you're moving boats around the map, collecting all sorts of goodies and resources, and the rule book instructs you to put them all face down and then flip them face up, so that the whole game is like, okay, which resource do I want? And then I go there. Well, the person who taught me the game read the first half of that sentence, but not the second half. So we played the entire game getting random rewards for exploring outward. And I was just going, this is absurd. Yeah. Like, I'm getting nothing.
Yeah.
And they're getting so much that I have not returned to the game. And people go, well, have you played Endeavor? And it's like, maybe.
Yeah, right. And so ways to combat that. So obviously, if you're the person whose role it is to teach the game, I guess the easiest thing to do is just to make sure that you've got it. But can be a big ask when it comes to games that are very complicated. So, I mean, I know sometimes, Kellen, you mentioned there was some group where everybody's encouraged to read the rule book before coming to the game night.
Yeah, some groups do have that rule, and that's not something that we do.
Yeah.
We kind of put the burden on one of us to know their stuff.
Yeah.
But other groups say, yeah, like, hey, or watch this video.
I would say having everybody read the rule book seems extreme, but I do like the idea of having everybody, if there's something available on YouTube or something, having everybody watch a rules review, even without that being like the sole teaching. but some sort of like structure. So at least when people are going in to play the game, they have some idea of how it works to sort of supplement the actual teaching of the rules.
Right, I remember that being how I learned Mage Knight, for example, which is a game with quite a dense rule set, and I think everyone just having had that preamble of like, this is at least a overview of everything we're doing, internalizing some of the specifics, and then having someone else explain it in depth on the day made a massive difference.
Yeah, that's how I learned TI4 actually. Ruel from the 5x, who I played it with, sent me a couple of videos and said like, any rules that you're not clear with, we'll be happy to teach you there, but just to get an idea of how things work. And it worked really, really well. It cut down the teaching time tremendously, and I felt really comfortable going in to a somewhat complicated game that first time.
There's also something I think that goes frequently wrong is when you try to sort of teach a game to the wrong audience and you insist that they're going to like it rather than actually catering a game to their specific tastes. I feel like family game nights can be
coming out of the holiday season. This is like a time where
we're going to play Twilight Imperium. And meanwhile, everyone's just in the mood for just one or something much, much lighter. Yeah.
But my 6-year-old knows how to play Robinson Crusoe.
Well, there we go.
And that's going to do it for our discussion on how to make sure that first play of a game is as good as it can be. If you have tips or if you have anecdotes or stories, we'd love to hear them. You can share them on our Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord or on our guild, boardgamebarrage.com/guild, where it's more of a long form situation. But before we end the show, we're going to have a quick chat about things we're looking forward to in the coming weeks. Kellen, what are you looking forward to?
So, as a little update to my living library New Year's resolution, I have now made it a goal to have 100 games in this library. In addition to that, Christina has been given 5 vetoes for games I can't get rid of. Okay. So I have a lot of games right now listed for trade, for sale that are happening in the Strategicon Math Trade and Virtual Flea Market. But one of those cuts was Dixit getting consolidated into Detective Club.
Okay.
And so I'm just taking the cards from Dixit, putting them in Detective Club. I guess what I'm looking forward to is the continued consolidation of my gaming library, but I found a Dixit promo card. So this is and I'm showing it to you guys right now. This is a card that I purchased separately from the 90 to 200 Dixit cards that I had for $5 to $10 to try to acquire all the promos for Dixit.
Right.
And when I opened Dixit and I saw this, I was like, Kellen, you blowhard. Like, I am happy to somewhat say that I don't necessarily consider my board game library a collection, or that idea that I need to have all the promos is so much less than it used to be. When I started, I was buying everything, and I wanted, if there was a Dominion expansion promo, I had to have it. And so the idea that I have a Dixit promo card is like straight absurd to me.
Right.
Also, all my Dixit cards are sleeved. And I'm
crazy.
Now I have to sleeve my Detective Club cards, and that I will do. But I have 2 different kinds of sleeves in the box, so I have to do a sleeve test when I get home tonight. So I'm gonna have to feel them up a little bit. Go, is this Mayfair or is this Pan Asia? So that is what I am looking forward to do in the world of board gaming this week.
So you're trying to get down to 100. How many do you have? Do you know?
I got to 220-ish. And then with expansions, like 280. But expansions don't count.
Yeah.
And Oink games don't count.
The Oink exception.
The Oink games are actually displayed out, not in my collection. And then review copies don't count.
Yeah.
Cause,
so you have 220 aside from those?
Yes.
Wow. That's rough.
Yeah, it's gonna be brutal.
Yeah.
Deep cuts are happening. Christina played High Society yesterday. Quickly checked the list and put one of her vetoes on. And so she can move those vetoes. They aren't set in stone, but she might be, kind of moving them around to keep me at bay.
She explicitly told me to tell you that you're not allowed to get rid of air, land, and sea. She was very keen to tell me that last night.
Yeah, I think we have a problem because, I've given her a couple of games over the years, and so, Arboretum, right, I have on my get rid of pile, and so she's like, well, that's my game. And I'm like, but is it? It's in my closet here. So I'm trying to figure out how to do that. But I like the nice, clean number of 100.
Nealon.
I have a couple of games that have just come in that I'm excited to try. I have the expansion for Baron Park, which I believe you've played, Kellen. I'm excited to get that. The addition of the monorails feels like a fun little connective puzzle. And Awkward Guests, I managed to just get a copy of, which is a deduction take on Clue, a Clue style of game where there's a murder, but the murder is sort of randomized using a sort of card system, which apparently gives you infinite number of combinations. It's an interesting idea. I've not read the rules for it yet, but I'm excited
I've
to
heard good
dig
things
into
about
that.
it.
Yeah, same. Yeah, that's it for me.
What I'm looking forward to is something that actually is finished is the completion of the math trade. If you're looking for an analysis, I ended up having 33 trades in the Strategicon math trade, and I analyzed all of them very quickly on our Discord, so you could find that in the trading channel. But I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't mention, and this is sort of a bummer, but people know that I'm big into sports, and I know that the Venn diagram between sports fans and board game fans don't really often match up, but I'm a born and raised Angelino. We are recording this in Los Angeles, and one of the things I love about board games, one thing about things I love about sports is that it brings people together. You know, there's a negative side to it. You can get tribalism in sports, and that's bad. But it also is a way to meet around a table or meet at a bar, and root for the same things or enjoy yourself playing a game. And in Los Angeles, one of the best things about LA is one of the things that people knock about it is like the transient nature. It's a place where you get a lot of people coming in and out, and you get a lot of cultures, and that's great. But it also lends for a disconnectedness. And board games are a way when people come to LA, they can get friends groups by joining meetups and stuff like that. But also sports, and the Lakers are a team that sort of connects the city of LA. And for me growing up, that's always been something that I felt like connected the city. And so I feel like I need to mention the passing of Kobe Bryant, because a lot of my biggest memories from the city, the Lakers and him were intertwined. So, and I don't know, I just felt like something that needed to be mentioned as a board game show that happens in LA. And he was like my age, and it was just like a big thing for me. So, I know he's a complicated life and stuff like that, but just felt like something that needed to be sort of said.
As someone who's like entirely outside the sphere of sports, like I was incredibly moved by how many people I saw outpouring with just sadness today. Like I heard reports of people, friends of mine, walking into stores and just people being in tears.
Yeah, and I mean, I am like not into hero worship at all. Like I don't know, when things happen to celebrities and stuff like that, like it never affects me. I don't really keep up. I don't really care. But like the last time I felt like this was like when Robin Williams died. This felt like, and this may not be for everybody because of like the LA thing, but this one really messed up my day. So I don't know.
I think there's no doubt that his age plays a big factor, and that his daughter, passed away with him. Everyone's calling all their families. I don't know what happened with you guys, but like Christina called both of her parents,
right,
and I called my parents, and it's sort of like a touch point of like, hey, wait a minute, he's only 10 years older than me,
right,
and younger, and it's kind of been always there. He's always there.
Yeah.
And now is not. So it certainly is a reminder, in no small way.
Yeah. So it's hard to transition from that, but you can find us at boardgamebarrage.com/guild. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all those things. We're there for you to find. A big thank you as always to Heart Society for our intro and outro song, What's on Your Mind, Kid? We'll see you guys next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I just want to get the designer real quick, which I had for a second. Oh, there it is. There we go. Yep. Great.
Good luck.
Yep.
Say the designer's name, Neelan.
Yep.
You promised.
I was complimented on my French by
Yeah.
Sarul, and I'll just go, I'll have you know. My French pronunciation, I should say. So with that in mind, I'm going to subsequently butcher this.
Our rules explanation for this was 5 minutes, and we were good to go.
From a genius. Maestro? I was like, which were,
I think Genius works better than Maestro. I mean, both of them are inaccurate, but
I almost went with protege, and then I'm like, that's not.
That's all right.
you would be my protege. That's how it works.
If we could say, like, the absurdity that they're pips on dice, right? But that stacks of cards can't be hops. Riddle me this.
Well, okay, one is a word that's been established in language, and one is something in the machinations of Kellen's mind.
Language is whatever we want it to be.
Right?
And I learned that from my protege, Neelan.
But the guild was
That was the rewind. I mean, I trust you to edit this in a way that makes me sound
Always. As I always do.
as intelligent as possible,
And
as knowledge, as a subject expert,
As a scholar
scholar.
and a gentleman.